Welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is The Hill on NewsNation. Tonight, the president speaking with Vladimir Putin, but also lobbing some candid questions about his predecessor's health.
This is no longer politically correct. This is dangerous for our country. Look at the mess we're in. You're talking about all these questions on Ukraine and Russia that would have never happened. As an example, if I were president, it would have never happened. The other thing is you have to say, why did it take so long? I mean, when you... This takes a long time. It can take years to get to this level of danger. So it's a very, very sad situation. I feel very badly about it.
The former president and his health, the revelation from former President Biden, and the reaction from President Trump, including what the current White House is saying about the doctors who treat our country's leader. Plus, jailbreak in New Orleans. The governor there says politics is partly to blame. Is that really the case? Also tonight, look who's with us here on the Hill. Kevin O'Leary, later on the show, with us live as President Trump says Walmart should be the one to eat the tariffs. Really? Is that the case? Does the shark think the company should take that bite? And the big, beautiful bill and the big, complicated call. Republicans start to deliver for the president as he talks to Putin.
My whole life is like deals, one big deal. And if I thought that President Putin did not want to get this over with, I wouldn't even be talking about it because I'd just pull out.
But first tonight, here from the Hill, the health of the former president, Joe Biden, revealing his cancer diagnosis just months after leaving office. Mick Mulvaney joins me in a moment to explain how presidential testing is determined. But we begin with our Kelly Meyer live at the White House tonight, who was inside the Oval Office as the president was asked those questions. Kelly?
Yeah, hey there, Blake. So we just left the Oval Office where President Donald Trump commented publicly in person for the first time on the former president's diagnosis. I wanted to play a bit of what he had to say. Take a listen to this.
I think it's very sad, actually. I'm surprised that it wasn't, the public wasn't notified a long time ago, because to get to stage 9, that's a long time.
And we didn't just hear from President Trump. We also heard from Vice President J.D. Vance on this. Both were questioning when the former president knew about this diagnosis. Here's more from the vice president earlier today.
We really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. And that's no... that you can separate the desire for him to have the right health outcome with the recognition that whether it was doctors or whether there were staffers around the former president, I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people.
And earlier today, I asked former President Biden's spokesperson when they learned of this diagnosis or of this concern. They said they stand by the statement, where in the statement they said they found out on Friday, and they didn't say or comment any further. Blake.
Our Kelly Meyer, live from the North Lawn tonight after coming from the Oval Office. Kelly, thank you. All right, so chances are you don't know Joe Biden personally, but you know someone who's now taking on the same or similar challenge, whether it be a family member, a friend, a colleague, a neighbor. In the immediate aftermath of the news, the reaction politically was largely what you would hope: support for the former president going forward. But questions are also starting to be raised. For example, the renowned oncologist, Dr. Zeke Emanuel, says only 7% of men get diagnosed this advanced. He says it's surprising to those in his field the former president wasn't diagnosed earlier, and he believes that Biden had the cancer while in office. Dr. Emanuel says the decision to get tested while he was president was between him and his doctor.
Oh, he's had this for many years, maybe even a decade, growing there and spreading. It is true that a lot of people recommend not doing a prostate-specific antigen after 70, but President Biden's been in public life a very long time. He was vice president and had a lot of exams under 70. So it's a little surprising that they didn't do it, and maybe President Biden decided he didn't want the test. Many men do decide they don't want a PSA.
Now, keep in mind, in the last 5 presidential elections, there have been 11 Democratic and Republican nominees for president. 9 were men, and 6 times they were over the age of 70. Now, there is not a law that puts guardrails around how a president gets an annual physical. It typically happens at Walter Reed Medical Center, just down the road. outside the district here in Bethesda, Maryland. So what is that process like? Mick Mulvaney knows, as he was the former White House chief of staff in the Trump administration. Mick joins me live here on the Hill tonight. So too with us, Dan Cannonen, who was the Battleground States Director in the Biden campaign. Hello to you both. Thanks to have you in.
Hello, Berman.
Hello, sir. We heard from Dr. Emanuel there earlier this morning, Mick. He clearly struggled with the idea of, at that age, do you get tested for this? And this is a conversation that families all across the country have. The difference here, Mick, is it involved the president of the United States at the time. So what is the conversation? Not what is the conversation, but how is the decision made when a president gets a physical, what they are and what they're not tested for?
What Zeke Emanuel said there is mostly correct. It's correct for 99.9% of the population, which is what medical exams you have is between you and your doctor. And that's mostly the case with the President of the United States. But, and this is the exception, if the doctor was recommending something to be done and the president said, no, I don't want to do that, the chief of staff would know about it.
Okay.
You're just different when you're the president. You don't have that same level of privacy because you are the president. So if Joe Biden said, no, I don't want these exams, the chief of staff should know about it.
And we don't know what was or wasn't said. We don't know what was discussed or what wasn't. But from your perch, how do you view what happened given the news and the conversation and the discussions today?
It's hard because, first of all, everything in this town is politicized, number one.
Yeah.
Number two, this is coming against the backdrop of the book that's coming out about his mental abilities and so forth. And again, it's the president, which is a little bit different. People expect more transparency on one hand, but they also expect a little more secrecy on another with the president. The president's he's not going to share everything because he is the president. So look,
should they though?
It's a really difficult call, Blake. It is. And I just come back to, look, I'm not a doctor. I don't know. Zeke Emanuel is.
Right.
I thought it was interesting. He said, 7% of men who would be diagnosed this late, that's more than, 1/10 of 1%.
Yeah.
So I'm just assuming, because I'm a conservative, I don't believe in conspiracy theories until you give me evidence that this is just something they didn't catch until last week, until someone shows me evidence otherwise.
Dan, you sent me this article last week before any of this was known. And the title was, I work for Joe Biden. I love Joe Biden. He must rethink his post-presidency. And you told me you agreed with a lot of it. What do you mean? What do you mean by that? And especially given what we've seen here over the last 24 hours.
Well, that was Steve Shale, who was a Florida guy and did some of the super PAC work for the president back in 2016 when he did not run, but was preparing to run at that time. And Shale loves Joe Biden, thought he was a great president, and wanted him to be successful. And I think that he really was in his first term. The polls didn't always bear that out, obviously, or the way the campaign went. But what Steve is referencing is that there's some moments that folks would put the president in that weren't the best for him. And there were times when you could find a lane that really emphasizes humanity, his connection with people. Sometimes we do that in events on the campaign trail, or rather than a big rally, we get him on the rope line talking to a kid with autism or someone who's gone through a speech impediment and finding ways to connect to that human level. We did a training in Scranton with him where he talked to voters in Scranton and volunteers and did a training on his own life, how to talk about his life, and doing that in a way that really got back to the basics with him. That was powerful stuff. And some of the sort of tour that gets him out there on The View or those kind of venues isn't serving him well.
You don't think so?
And I don't think it's, no. I think
why is he doing it?
I think he does want to get out there. I think he wants to be part of this conversation. But what Steve is saying is there's a lane to do that makes sense for him and emphasizes his best character traits. And I just want to say about that Scranton training, and just to go back to this person and think about the cancer diagnosis now. One of the things he would talk about in that training was the loss of his first wife, Nelia, and his daughter, Naomi, right? Nelia Hunter Biden, the namesake of Hunter Biden, right? So you think about that tragic loss. And when he would talk about Nelia holding Jill Biden's hand, and then talk about Beau and losing Beau to brain cancer, and then even think about the Hunter piece of it, because Hunter was trouble for him politically, but still this connection was so deep and so real, and the cancer moonshot work. And now to have this moment for him, I want to emphasize one thing that he said when Rush Limbaugh, who Democrats loathe, was dealing with his cancer. Joe Biden said, I've got nothing but compassion for that man and his family. He's going through hell. I wish him the best.
Right. I
think that's what we should meet Joe Biden with right now.
And that's what Donald Trump responded with a tweet, which I think might have surprised more than a couple people, that it was his first response was nothing but sympathy.
That was the first response. Trump did go further today, though, and basically say, said, we need to look into this. When folks, Dan, and these books are coming out now, are going to be coming out, and they ask you, do you look back and were there things that you second guess? What do you tell people?
Look, I mean, there were times he was tired in the trail. You saw that. There were times he wasn't great. The debate was one of them. There was an anecdote I was just giving you, Blake, on the plane on the way back from a 4-state tour. It's 11 p.m. He's watching the news from the Air Force One. I was with him in that conference room, and I watched him do a 20-minute soliloquy on the Middle East. And I thought to myself, this guy has it. Now, that doesn't mean there weren't tough days because, he's 81 years old and it was a tough campaign. But I never believed he couldn't be president, didn't do a good job. And I also believed, and I still do, that the accomplishments, the bipartisan accomplishments, this Congress has passed, I think, 5 bills so far, Mick, 5? Infrastructure. But I just want to say, on the results, there was a thing that Joe Biden did that was powerful. And
there was one bipartisan bill they passed because
he was a strong president, did things that no one else could do, in my view.
Okay. All right, we'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Mick, Dan, thank you. See you later in the show.
See you in a bit.
Appreciate it. Yep. Joining me now from his home state of Delaware, Matt Meyer is the governor there with us once again live tonight here on the Hill. Governor, thanks for being with us. You were with the former president a few weeks ago. You received the news last night. What can you tell us about what Joe Biden is up to right now?
Yeah, it's good to see you, Blake. Thanks for having me on. I was sad, like I imagine nearly everyone in the country was, to hear of former President Biden's diagnosis. And like so many across the country, we're praying for the family. As Dan just articulated, we all know how challenging it can be for a family to go through this. And we ask that everybody give the family grace and support in this challenging time. We all should come together as a country, regardless of who the former president is, regardless of what your political party is. Let's all root for the Bidens and make sure they get through this.
There are, and everyone is, as the immediate reaction, obviously, Governor, myself, I'm sure yourself, all of us here, we're focused on him and his health, but there's now the conversation. We just heard it out of the Oval Office, and for example, today from the Vice President. Let me play for you J.D. Vance. I'll get your reaction.
We really do need to be honest about whether the former president was capable of doing the job. I don't think he was able to do a good job for the American people. And that's not politics. That's not because I disagreed with him on policy. That's because I don't think that he was in good enough health. In some ways, I blame him less than I blame the people around him.
Do you find that to be a reasonable question or a reasonable line of...
The last time the Trump administration did a medical diagnosis, he was telling the country to drink bleach. So I'm not sure we really rely on the Trump administration right now to make medical judgments.
Well, I don't know that they're making medical judgments. I think they're raising a question, and I don't know where this goes, Governor, but I mean, there's already Republicans signaling that they might want to investigate some of this, and I just wonder if you find that to be a reasonable line.
Well, can we have an independent doctor go in and look at our current president's medical condition, like both Mick and Dan just stated before me? There's a balance here between the privacy of a family during a challenging time and the public's right to know. What we know now is that President Biden is no longer our president, and this is a man who's got a very serious cancer condition. My father had prostate cancer. Many people around the country know people with prostate cancer. We need to give them grace.
And as I mentioned, as I started off by saying, this is something that hits basically every family, whether it's your family, not prostate cancer specifically, but cancer, whether it's your family, your friends, your neighbor, someone you've known in your life. I'll give you the last word.
Yeah, well, one other thing, Blake, is that President Joe Biden is in a better situation today than he would have been, or someone like him would have been 5 or 10 or 15 years ago, because of the work of Joe Biden. Very few policymakers have done more for cancer research, for cancer survivability than Joe Biden has.
All right, Governor, if you see him, please pass along the best wishes. I know you were with him just a few weeks ago. Governor Matt Meyer is the Democrat there in the home state of Delaware with us tonight here on the Hill. Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mike.
You got it. All right, still to come tonight. Have you seen this video yet? A jailbreak in New Orleans. Inmates on the loose for several days now. How did it happen? And why is the governor blaming Democratic policies? We're live from the Big Easy. Plus, they call him Mr. Wonderful. Kevin O'Leary live with us tonight here on the Hill. Tariffs and the news consumers are waiting for. We got Kevin's thoughts. And the VP meets the Pope, delivering a letter from the president. What was that all about? When we return here on the Hill, welcome to Washington. I'm Blake Berman. This is the Center of Politics. I'll see you back here in 4 minutes. Have you seen this yet? The video from that big jailbreak in New Orleans tonight. 7 of the 10 inmates that escaped still on the run, considered dangerous by law enforcement authorities. They say there are even signs that they probably, potentially, had help from the inside. And the Louisiana governor, Jeff Landry, in part is blaming Democratic policies.
The video of those prisoners escaping epitomizes a progressive criminal justice system.
All right, we'll get to that in a second. But first, to our Mills Hayes, who is live in New Orleans with what we are learning tonight. Mills?
Hi, Blake. Well, we are on day 4 of this manhunt. 7 of those inmates are still on the run right now. And out of those 7, 1 has been convicted of 2 second-degree murders, and then 3 have been charged with second-degree murder. So we are talking about people who are charged and convicted of violent crimes. We're told that they are armed and dangerous. But I want to show you guys this crazy video from the escape where we saw it all go down. This was in the Orleans Justice Center. The inmates escaped through a hole behind a toilet and then ran off a loading dock. And then the inmates threw a blanket over a barbed wire fence, jumped over, and then ran across an interstate. Now, let's take a look at who these people are. That person I said, convicted of 2 second-degree murders, that's Derek Groves, who was convicted of killing 2 people on Mardi Gras Day back in 2018. The other 6 have been charged with crimes like second-degree murder, domestic abuse involving strangulation, aggravated assault, theft of a car. And the deputy chief of corrections for Orleans Justice Center says that they had a large number of high security individuals in a minimum custody facility. And for example, Linton Van Buren is another inmate on the run. He was arrested back in 2021 for second degree murder and armed robbery, but he's still awaiting a trial date. And Louisiana Governor Jeff Landry, you guys mentioned him. Well, he spoke yesterday and he issued some executive orders. He has asked the State Department of Corrections to actually audit the Orleans Justice Center. And he's also called on the Inspector General to create a list of all the detainees that are in that jail that haven't gone to trial and haven't been sentenced. Blake?
Our Mills Hayes live tonight in New Orleans. Mills, thank you. Joining me now, Tracy Walder, NewsNation contributor, former FBI special agent, former CIA officer. I texted this to Tracy a little while ago, but I was watching a documentary this weekend, and it was about the best CIA officers that the agency had. And there's Tracy. She pops up on the screen. Tracy back with us live once again here on the Hill. Good to see you.
Good to see you too, Blake.
So how are they out there on the run for so long? I mean, I got to imagine every asset and resource is dedicated to this.
Yeah, that's what's so interesting about this. So Mills was talking about this justice facility as a whole. This is very much an urban facility. This isn't like a lot of the prisons that we've been talking about where we've seen these jailbreaks that are in these very wooded, rural sort of areas. So you would think in an area like this, it would actually be easier to find them, but it's actually more difficult because you have to essentially go door to door to door to door. These are very violent individuals. You have no idea if they are coercing people. They probably have ties to the area, quite frankly, and people may be helping them.
The governor there, I don't know if he's frustrated. I'm sure he's frustrated, but blame this on progressive policies. Should he have gone there, or is there something to it?
I actually understand where he's coming from. I'm not sure that this is the time or the place. And let me tell you why. So I teach criminal justice now. They use something called direct supervision in this facility. Direct supervision is a more progressive form of, I guess, policing the jails, if you will. In that room, these inmates congregate together. Basically, they are not separate. They are not behind jail cells. They congregate together in dormitories. And the prison guards form pretty deep personal relationships with them because they are the ones supervising them. They're not essentially behind bars and on video cameras. And I think because of this, they perhaps formed relationships with some of these individuals that allowed them to escape.
She is Tracy Walder, NewsNation contributor. Gotta run. Wish I had more time. I'm sure I'll see you soon. Thanks, Tracy.
Thank you.
All right, still much more ahead tonight here on the Hill. Eat the tariffs. That's what the president is telling Walmart after the retailer said it would raise prices in the upcoming weeks. The Wall Street Journal says the president is acting like the CEO. Is the Journal right? Kevin O'Leary live with us on the other side of the break. And Look who was at the White House today, Melania Trump, why she was there when The Hill returns. Just about 6:30 here on the East Coast, in Washington as well. President Trump calling out Walmart after the retailer said during an earnings call last week that it would be raising prices in the next few weeks or so, most likely due to the tariffs. The president then writing, quote, Walmart should stop trying to blame tariffs as the reason for raising prices throughout the chain. Walmart made billions of dollars last year. He said they should eat the tariffs. Now, we'll get a chance to see if other retailers follow suit. For example, several of the biggest brands in this country are reporting their own earnings this week. Home Depot tomorrow, Lowe's and Target on Wednesday, Ross and BJ's on Thursday. We'll likely get some sort of an idea of the early impacts, or not. We'll see. Who knows what the president's tariffs could be having on these businesses and the economy as a whole. Back with us here on The Hill, Kevin O'Leary, chairman of O'Leary Ventures, better known as Mr. Wonderful, friend of the show. Kevin, nice to see you. Happy Monday.
Great to be here. Thank you.
So, look, you remember the headlines last week with Walmart, right? And there was obviously a lot of, it got a lot of attention, and folks were talking about it for days. I'm looking at Target as the 4th largest employer, Home Depot the 5th, Lowe's the 9th. They're inevitably going to make some news here in the next, 24 to 48 hours. What are you listening for?
Well, obviously, right now we have this quiet period with China where so many of these goods come from. And July 9th, it switches over. We're going to find out what the reciprocal tariffs are going to be. This idea that the president says, listen, retailers, eat the tariffs, that's not going to happen. There's going to be some distribution of the pain between increased prices, and the retailers will take some of the hit, but it really depends what the hit is. We don't know. Is it 10%, 20%, 25%? What is it? Nobody knows. And of course, they're going to lobby the administration around this. What we really want to get to is a finalization of all these tariff agreements around the world, notably the Europeans, of course, the Indians, the Japanese, right, Canada, Mexico, and China. And so that's really got to get worked out. I really think that this is kind of like job owning between the retailer and Trump. But that's it. We're at the beginning of a negotiation.
Speaking of negotiation, Republicans are negotiating among themselves right now, trying to get that quote-unquote big, beautiful bill. We had the Moody's downgrade last week. Jamie Dimon today said, we have huge deficits. We have what I consider almost complacent central banks. You all think they can manage this. I don't think they can. Republicans are talking about racking up another $3 to $4 trillion in deficits over the next decade or so. Are they playing with fire doing that?
There's a ton of pushback on this right now. There's a lot of different attributes to the bill, including going through the Senate and getting that clear. There's an attribute in there that I discovered that's really freaking me out, is to extend audit periods on small businesses for 9 years. They wouldn't be able to get a loan with that uncertainty. I don't know how that got in there, but obviously we're going to try and get that out because
What is it specifically?
If you took ERC or PPP, remember that, the keeping small businesses alive? They want the IRS to be empowered for up to 9 years to audit you. Who is going to lend you any money with that uncertainty? How would you merge, to get bigger? How would you raise any capital from anybody if you knew the IRS could bring a hammer down for 9 years on you? I think it's a cut and paste mistake. I'm the only guy that reads these bills. I read it in the context of small business. Right. I just couldn't believe what I read, and I've let everybody in the Hill know this can't stand. You can't do this to small business. And while we're talking bills, as we speak, the Haggerty Genius Act is on the floor getting voted on. Elizabeth Warren.
I want to ask you about it. I'm going to get to it right now because I've said repeatedly on this show, I don't know if you think I'm right or wrong, that I think crypto was one of the reasons that Donald Trump won the popular vote, because you have tens of millions of people who own it. And they said, look, that's my money, and he's better for me than Kamala Harris. And I think that's one of the reasons why he won the popular vote. They're debating right now the Genius Act, which involves stable coins. Here's what Elizabeth Warren said, and then I want to get your reaction on the other side, Kevin.
For the first time in American history, This bill will make our president, Donald Trump, the regulator of his own financial product. This Congress should be a check on the president. Congress should not be making it even easier for him to line his pockets with even more shady crypto cash.
Now, there has been bipartisan support for this, but that's the argument on the other side. What would you say to the senator?
Well, first of all, let's talk about Elizabeth Warren. She not only has Trump derangement syndrome, she has crypto derangement syndrome. Okay. That's a powerful cocktail of confusion for her. This bill has nothing to do with Trump. This is a digital payment system that establishes the U.S. dollar as a default currency around the world for price discovery on every commodity on earth. Why wouldn't she want that? Why wouldn't every American want that? This is the definition of what currency will be in digital payment systems. If we don't want it, the Chinese will do it with the yuan. You don't want that. This is a chance to move forward a technology that's incredibly productive for digital payment systems, large and small businesses alike. What she's doing right now is un-American. She's trying to tie this bill to Trump. It has nothing to do with me.
There are worries, though, about the family business and some of the properties and stable coins within some of those.
All is fair in love and war, in particularly politics, but this has completely deranged what she's doing. As we speak, she could stymie American technology and advancement on digital payment systems, which has nothing to do with Trump.
Why should the average American care about this? Like, I get crypto a little bit, probably more so than the average person, but when they see this and wonder why Washington is debating it, why should they pay attention?
I'll give you a very good reason. You know, this weekend, Moody's downgraded America. They took it down. Who's the number one buyer of T-bills if this bill passes? Those that actually create these stable coins. There will be billions and billions and billions of dollars of buying in these T-bills up to 92 days duration. It'll create demand for T-bills. It'll make the American dollar and the T-bill even more strong, which is what you want. Everybody, you think about the price of gold, you think about the price of oil, natural gas, all around the world, rare minerals, rare earth, precious metals. It's all American dollars. Now we digitize that. We create the standard globally for all digital payment systems. Who doesn't want that? Apparently, Elizabeth Warren. Why? What
Kevin,
is the matter?
When you're in town next time, come on and visit us here on set. Hope to see you then.
I love to.
All right. Kevin O'Leary, thank you, sir. Talk soon.
Take care.
You got it. Still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, the president makes one of the biggest phone calls yet of his second term.
We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made.
So there was one big complicated phone call, I guess you could put it, on a day in which Republicans also advanced that one big beautiful bill. Where does it all go from here? Full panel, other side.
Thank you for joining me here on NewsNation.
No matter where you are, America's fastest growing, down the middle, unbiased, breaking news coverage is always at your fingertips. Download the NewsNation app or go to newsnationnow.com to learn how.
There was some advancement today on the quote-unquote big, beautiful bill, but was there any progress gained on what you could call one complicated call? The president held a phone call today with the Russian President Vladimir Putin. President Trump saying that Russia and Ukraine will immediately begin negotiations on a ceasefire and that the Vatican has offered to host talks between potentially Putin and Vladimir Zelensky. President Trump speaking afterwards.
Well, I want to thank everybody. We just spent 2.5 hours talking to Vladimir Putin, and I think some progress has been made. It's a terrible situation going on over there. We're trying to get that whole thing wrapped up.
Our Kelly Meyer, shortly after that, in the Oval Office with the president.
You mentioned that you believe Putin wants peace, but he just attacked Ukraine yesterday. So what makes you think that he wants peace?
Well, he's in a war, you know. I mean, nobody said don't. They're fighting. They're attacking each other. And people are dying all the time.
But that's only one test. There's also one on the home front, you could say, the big, beautiful bill, as the president likes to label it. The bill passing through the House Budget Committee, but it still has several more steps in the House of Representatives. Before then, it could even get into the Senate, and then that's a whole nother issue. With some Republicans balking at the price tag, it's anything but a sure thing. Full panel here with me now. Mick Mulvaney, former chief of staff in the first Trump White House, NewsNation contributor. Lindsey Granger, NewsNation contributor as well. Denise Gitsham, NewsNation political contributor and former aide in the George W. Bush administration. And Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States director for both the Biden and Harris campaigns. How about those titles? Happy Monday, y'all. Thanks for being with us tonight.
Happy
here
Monday.
On the Hill. I noticed something different from Trump, Mick, the president. Afterwards, the call with Putin, he put out the statement and basically said something to the effect of, it's in their hands now. They're the ones that have to negotiate it. And I'm like, wait a minute. That's a tone shift from Donald Trump. What does it say about where he thinks
the
things
first
are?
tone wasn't working. But I have two takeaways. Number one, the call was 2.5 hours. Even with translation, that's a long time for a call. And you have to sort of assume, unless someone tells you different, that means it went well. Bad phone calls go for a very brief period of time. So talk for an hour and a half on the merits, probably a good call. But here's the other issue. The talks are going to begin immediately, okay? Trump can get away from the I'll solve it in 24 hours. I think people took that as hyperbole. But you walk out of the Oval Office into the Rose Garden and say, I just hung on the phone with Putin. Talks are going to start immediately. They need to start immediately and be curious to see if that actually happens or not.
You know, Trump has put so much of his political capital on resolving this issue that it almost shifted the onus of responsibility onto his shoulders and away from Putin and Zelensky in a way, because he campaigned on it. He said, we're going to solve this on the first day. And so what I think you're seeing is him saying, I want to own this because I want to be the deal maker in chief internationally, the diplomat in chief, the everything in chief. Right. But at the same time, he can't do it. And what you've seen is a shift away from just the sticks, because Russia's the most sanctioned country in the world right now. There are no more sanctions we can put on it. If there were, he would have done it to cause them to change their actions. So he has to include something like trade in that mix that actually is a carrot to get Putin.
So that's where I was going next. Is that the carrot? Is that what's going to solve this or no?
No, I think that we have to remember that Trump already spoke to Putin earlier this year in February, and that didn't go anywhere. He had multiple statements and tweets that this was going to be solved and that there was some kind of solution. Same 24 hours. We've been giving him 5 months of 24 hours and nothing has been resolved. Right. But I think it's important to understand, like, this is at this point mocking the United States, in my opinion. I think when you look at what's happening, he had a huge bombardment on Sunday of Ukraine in the midst of understanding that this phone call was going to happen. Putin skipped completely the Istanbul talks when Ukraine...
those were like lower level delegations.
Right, because he wouldn't show up because, Zelensky was asking him, please show up, let's solve this. So he kind of is just doing whatever he wants. And I think when we start to cower to a dictator, that kind of shows that America is not willing to stand on its own 2 feet and kind of sets the tone for how we... Yeah, I do think he's cowering, because I think with not just more sanctions, but more action behind your words and more enforcement and not treating Ukraine like...
Did you say the same thing about Biden?
I think that they should treat Ukraine like the victim that it is.
Did Biden do enough on sanctions? Did Biden do enough on aid? I mean, what would you have Trump do that Biden didn't do?
I mean, I think he should just take a different tone.
I agree. I think that the whole idea that he's going to praise Putin, perhaps coming out of the fact that he has no leverage, while he denigrates Zelensky and our allies, is not a great way long-term for this relationship.
You think Trump has no leverage?
Well, if he does, he's not finding it right now.
Look, this is tough. I think they're frustrated. I think he really thought this would be easier to solve than it is. But I just come back to not looking backwards, looking forward. What's going to happen next? Now I fully expect there to be a conversation between Ukraine and Russia. And if there isn't, I'm going to want to know why. And I expect he's going to want to know why, because he walked out of that meeting believing there's going to be a conversation.
One complicated call, or one big complicated call, however I wanted to put it, with Putin.
You like that, don't you?
There was the big, beautiful bill.
Big, beautiful bill. Big, complicated call.
Yeah, Republicans delivered, though, for him in the House, Denise, overnight. There's still a long way to go here.
Yeah.
With all of this.
But what you're seeing is two things. One, Jody Arrington, who's one of my dearest friends, is incredibly talented with people. People love him. They wanted to work with him. It got done. The second thing is, Mick and I understand this as people who've run for Congress. You won. I didn't, but I still went through the process. And what you know is that in the next few months, people are making decisions about whether they're going to jump into a race. And nobody wants to be primaried from a Trump
endorsed candidate because they didn't get in line. So this is the timing where every member of Congress, every House member is saying, do I want to go down as a person who blocked Trump? When the latest polls show that 60+% of Republicans are supportive and believe in Trump, while only about 39%, which is relatively high compared to historically, but only 39% of people believe in congressional leadership on the GOP side.
That's why when you said kudos to Jody Arrington, I was thinking to myself, wait a minute, no, this is all about Trump at the end of the day.
But you have to have good deputies that can get things done, and people want to work with Jody.
But I think this is a litmus test for the Republican Party because you said there are a lot of the party that's MAGA loyalists, but then there's also part of the party that's fiscal conservatives that have been fiscal conservatives and can't vote on this bill. It makes no sense for them. Then there's people who actually care about the re-election campaign, the midterms, and their lifestyle moving forward. Well, maybe not if they're going to cut Medicaid, like Senator Josh Hawley saying, you send that bill down here with Medicaid cuts, how are we going to move forward? So I think we have to have these real conversations of like, you're having this bill come out on the backs of Americans that put you in office. Medicaid is not only for certain people, it's for everyone.
A lot on the line for the president and Republicans. What's on the line for your side of the aisle?
Well, I think we have to communicate what's happening to voters. I mean, the old adage in Washington is don't tell me your priorities, show me your budget. And in this budget, to your point, there'll be Medicaid cuts, there's going to be an explosion of the deficit, there'll be high-income earner benefits and low-income earner pain. And I think that's the polar opposite of what Donald Trump campaigned on, Republicans campaigned on. They promised to deliver on lower prices. There's nothing in this bill to do that. And instead, they're going to reward high-income earners, cut Medicaid, explode the deficit, and we have to be clear about what they're doing and take it to voters and make that case. If we fail to do that, that's on us, but we have to prosecute that case aggressively.
Here was the president on whether or not this gets done. Watch.
Wow, I wish we could get that vote. Some other things. We have another bill coming up. Do you think we'll get that vote? Maybe not. We should, but we probably won't.
Where are you tonight, Mick?
They have to pass something. Because if they don't do anything, and Congress is really good at doing nothing. They're better at doing nothing than doing something, okay? But doing nothing here is effectively the largest tax increase in history, which is what's driving these fiscal conservatives so crazy, is because they don't want to blow a hole in the budget, but they also don't want to raise taxes. And I think that's the difficulty that they've got. I think ultimately they do pass something. This is the Trump tax cuts. What does Trump care about as much as anything in the whole world? The brand. This is his deal, be like Obama defending Obamacare. Right. It's got his name on it. They're going to pass something to extend most of the tax cuts. The rhetoric, though, Dan, is so hollow because you can't give, if half the country doesn't pay income tax, you can't give them a tax cut. And so they're not paying anything. So the rhetoric is so hollow.
If you're taking 14 million people and kicking them off Medicaid,
right?
If you're cutting
Medicaid
SNAP
is not
benefits,
for everybody. This is not.
It's not for everyone.
But if you're doing those things to pay for these high income or tax cuts, and you could put some millionaire and billionaire tax hikes on the table and actually make it pay for it, but they're not going to do that.
To make healthy men work for a benefit.
Yes.
It doesn't have to do with money. It has to do with policy.
The ultimate result that would be 14 million people, CBO said this, off of Medicaid. That will be the reality. And you could pay for that.
Should they be on there in the first place? I guess is the policy question,
Sure.
not the budget question.
Yes. So this morning, Senator Murphy was saying it was 10 million, but maybe it's 14. If you look at the number of able-bodied people who are on Medicaid that aren't on other, things that would say that they're not able-bodied, they're not on disability,
right.
It's 6.3 million Americans. Between New York City and California alone, where everyone is eligible, undocumented, people who are not American citizens, literally we get to 8.4 million people. That's already, and that's not counting the 11 other states and the District of Columbia that has undocumented migrants that are on Medicaid.
Just some of the conversation. You heard it from both sides here on the Hill. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come tonight. Look who was in the Rose Garden earlier today. Why Melania Trump helped sign a bill into law. And coming up on Elizabeth Vargas Reports, she has complete coverage of that massive manhunt in New Orleans. That's coming up in just minutes. My take, other side of the break. With the Pope and passing along a letter to the American-born Pope from the president.
The Vice President passed along a letter to the Pope from the President and from the First Lady, extending their warm wishes and inviting them to the White House as soon as they possibly can come.
The last time a sitting Pope visited the White House, a decade ago in 2015, when Pope Francis, at the time, as you see there, met with then President Obama. All right, time for my take now as we close out the night. Washington comes together, gets one right, and a rare appearance as we end out the show. The president today, alongside the First Lady, signing the Take It Down Act. It's a law that might not have even been discussed even a decade ago, not because of politics, rather what it addresses. The law now makes it illegal for sharing non-consensual AI-generated images. Another way to put it, sexually explicit deepfakes. The president signing the law in the Rose Garden alongside the First Lady Melania Trump.
This will be the first ever federal law to combat the distribution of explicit, imaginary, posted without subjects' consent. They take horrible pictures and I guess sometimes even make up the pictures and they post it without consent.
Now, the bill got over 400 votes in the House, passed unanimously in the Senate. The First Lady instrumental as well in getting the bill to the president's desk. And as you see there, when they sat down, even put a ceremonial signature on the law. So when a town that often has its share of disagreement and very loud fights, a moment to notice the sounds today coming from the bipartisan applause. And we thank you for watching us tonight here on The Hill. We'll be back tomorrow. I'm Blake Berman.